Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Thor! Starring Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Stellan Skarsgård, Colm Feore, sorry if I said that wrong, Ray Stevenson, Idris Elba, Kat Dennings, Clark Gregg, and Rene Russo, and Anthony Hopkins as Odin, and directed by Kenneth Branagh. Let's put this down for now. Boom! Now, before I get into the movie, I did have a couple of good experiences with this movie when I saw it in theaters. So, what did I think of it now? Well, let's get into it. We open with Natalie Portman as plain Jane Foster. Yes, I'm going to call her that throughout the show because she's not a very good actress. Stellan Skarsgård as Eric Selvig, and Kat Dennings as Darcy. And Portman is so plain in this movie. She is super boring here, like she was in the Star Wars prequels. Stellan Skarsgård is maybe the best thing for the Avengers reasons. I like him better than Portman, and Darcy is here for comedic reasons, which was appropriate for fish out of water reasons. Anthony Hopkins gives a good commanding presence as Odin, who is part of the Norse mythology, and he was great when he was awake. He spends most of the movie in his Odin sleep, which made me think he was wasted in this movie. Asgard is absolutely beautiful, especially in 3D. I feel it was great to look at. Chris Hemsworth, known as Thor, is... Now, when I first saw this movie, I only knew him in the recent Star Trek movie as Kirk's father, and I sort of like him in this movie. I think he improves from this movie to Ragnarok, which I appreciated throughout the movies he's been in. Rene Russo is not only miscasted, but wasted in this movie as Frigga, who, what little she does, she really didn't need to be in this movie. Tom Hiddleston as Loki will improve after this movie, because here he was a poor villain for Thor, but a much better villain in the Avengers than here. He was poorly developed as half human, half frost giant in this entire movie, and yes, that's what they're calling it, those creatures that are blue, frost giants. Sif and the Warriors 3 did make me think of Jackie Chan and Xena and Robin Hood because they look a lot like that. And I reviewed one of those three before. I reviewed before in The Punisher Warzone, Ray Stevenson as Volstagg with his constant eating. I like that character. But these characters are, except for now, were pathetic except for Sif, who was the only badass of the team. The fight in the Frost Giant world may be the best action scene in this entire movie, one of the two. This may be number one, I'll get to number two later. Or, this is number two, I'll get to number one later. Particularly since I love the way Thor throws his hammer at the Frost Giants in a straight line, and the way he pounds the hammer on the ground with lightning was a good move, but it isn't saying much. So Odin casts out Thor and puts him in New Mexico with his hammer, and leads to plain Jane as well as Eric Selvig and Darcy, and all of this unnecessary comedy bits like plain Jane keeps on hitting him with their car, and Darcy shoots him with the taser, and all the fish out of water stuff works better in the shape of water than in this thing. I do like the Stan Lee cameo when he pulls out Thor's hammer and says, "Did it work?" It was fun to see. We connect to the after credits scene from Iron Man 2, where Agent Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, which again I feel bad for him for being bullied in Iron Man 2, and here he's no fun like he will be in the Avengers. The whole story of Odin saying where Loki came from as a baby was just poor because there was no freaking way that he was a frost giant. If anybody who reads the comic books, tell me if I'm wrong on this. Please let me know in the comments below, but was never brought up in the other movies. Dr. Selvig says he had a colleague who is an expert of gamma radiation, and I'm thinking it's Bruce Banner for comic book reasons, because he's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he's on the Avengers team, so who else do we know of that has experience with in the gamma radiation? Please let me know in the comments bottom. I think it might be Bruce Banner, in my opinion. While we see Thor beating up all of S.H.I.E.L.D. guards, We get introduced briefly to Hawkeye with his bow and arrow, with Thor trying to take back his hammer, which Hawkeye, played by Jeremy Renner, will be in the Avengers, isn't the right way to knock out Thor. So I'm glad Thor didn't get knocked out, but the action scene is probably the second best action scene in the movie. The first one is the Frost Giant. I barely brought up Idris Elba as Heimdall, who I enjoyed in this movie. He may be the brightest casting choice, even though a lot of people didn't think so at first. In today's movies, these days and again, I like him here. When Thor and Plain Jane have scenes together, it felt very Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson Twilight kind of crap, and I thought was a poor choice, very poor choice for this movie. Like, the romance here is bad as Twilight and the Star Wars prequels blended together. Thor vs. the Destroyer was a battle done very cheap, because the Destroyer is like a bad version of a giant robot with a power of sunlight, being controlled by Loki, and knocks Thor's ass out like a snap of a finger. He has the powers again. Was unfortunately unrealistic. The Thor versus Loki fight felt very staged and badly choreographed with some wire foo. And Loki again is not a very good villain in here, unlike the Avengers. And Thor breaking the bridge was pretty stupid. The Samuel Jackson scene with Nick Fury and Dr. Selvig was an intense scene, as we don't know what the hell's going on. And suddenly there's a cube of unlimited power, and suddenly Loki shows up and gets into Selvig's head saying, well, I guess that's worth a look. That setup for the Avengers was second least exciting compared to Iron Man 2, which was absolutely worthless if you watch this movie now. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 6.9 out of 10. The characters were a little weak, and the romance felt very Twilight, but better done than in that movie and the Star Wars prequels. But this is definitely a better movie than Iron Man 2 by any means necessary, and I would watch this over Iron Man 2, despite how much of a hard sell this is. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next week I will be back with Captain America: The First Avenger. And before I say goodbye, thanks for watching. I hope you subscribe, watch some more videos, and please leave a positive comment in the bottom if you can, and also tell me what things I missed in the story. And until next time, Avengers Assemble!